And we're going to be continuing in the Mark of the Beast, Volume 2. And we're going to be starting off on Chapter 7 today, which is the sixth seal of the seven seals. And it starts here on page 69. And we'll just go ahead and we'll start right here where it says in Revelation 6, 12 through 17. And this is where the sixth seal is described. And in the book of Yahweh it reads, "And I looked, and when he had opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth as a fig tree drops its untimely figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. And the heaven departed like a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and every island were moved out of their place. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman and every freeman sought protection for themselves in their governments and in the assemblies and the houses of their gods, Elohim, and said to the houses of their gods, their Elohim, and the assemblies, Fall on us, and protect us from the face of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come, and who will be able to stand?" Now, we've got to remember that this day of Yahweh, it's not a day of wrath, but it's a day of judgment. Okay? We have to remember that in the laws of Yahweh, the judgments are set. Okay? If we keep a law, as Deuteronomy shows us, if we keep the laws, then blessings will come. However, if we violate the laws, then there's certain consequences that are going to come from violating that law. Not that there's going to be somebody there that's going to be waiting for somebody to mess up and then, I'm going to send this down upon you. You know, that's Christianity. That's a Christian thought. That's a Christian mentality. To perpetuate that mean old God of the Old Testament. You know, and this is how they try to perpetuate and build up their God of love, who will let you just do whatever you want to do and no consequences whatsoever. You know, that's not realistic. Not at all. I mean, it's not realistic in just when you just consider nature. You know, you think about, for every reaction or for every action, there's a reaction that goes along with it. Well, for every action that we have in our behavior, there's either a blessing or a blessing or a reward that goes with it, or there's a curse or a consequence that goes along with it. We work hard, we do our job, we're rewarded with a paycheck. We're rewarded for our hard efforts. You know, we get lazy at work, we do a job halfway, we're supposed to be out on a construction site somewhere and we're curled up in the back end of the truck sleeping. Well, we're not going to hold that job very long. The consequence of that is we are going to be fired from that. And as a result, it's going to be very difficult for us to provide for our family if that takes place. Now, a carnally minded person would look at that and say, I can't believe that boss fired me. No, you did it yourself. The judgment was already set. The judgment was already there. You know, when you signed up to do that work, when you hired on for that job, that was the job that you signed up for. You do your work and you're going to get rewarded. If you don't, then we're going to find somebody that will. It's really that simple. And it's the same way. It's the same way that it is in the world. You know, if we violate Yahweh's law in any way, you know, then there are going to be curses or consequences that come along with that. We eat unclean food, we're going to get sick. You know, if we eat clean food and we do those things that our bodies were meant to do, we put in them the things that were meant to be put in there, then they're going to become strong, they're going to be healthy, they're going to function properly. But in the fifth seal, Pastor writes here, the fifth seal of Revelation 6, 9 through 11, we saw that there would be another killing of Yahweh's saints. And remember, the physical killing is part of it, but also the desire, the calling for the death. You know, the calling for the death. Pastor and has had, people want him dead. They don't want him to finish this work. They don't want him around. They don't want him exposing their sins, which is exactly what he's doing. which is the same thing that the prophets of old did, the same thing that Yahshua Messiah did. He's fulfilling his job. Yahweh has told him, you point these things out. You cry aloud, you spare not, you show these people their sins. And this is the job, pointing out what the results of what the consequences of breaking the law brings. And it shows here, it says, the scripture revealed this killing would begin when Satan was cast to the earth. And then, contrary to popular belief, here it says, Satan has not been cast to the earth yet. It says, contrary to popular belief, Satan has not been cast to the earth yet, which was a very true statement at the time this book was written. Okay? That was a true statement at the time that this book was written. And this book was written when did Pastor say it was in the 70s? Late 70s, and was published in the early 80s, I think. It was published sometime in the 80s here. The copyright here says 1986, but it could very well have been at least partially in print before that time. But Satan has been cast to the earth. If you remember what's written in the book, The Nuclear Baby, The Explosion of Sin, it covers that. It covers that very well. I believe it's on pages, if I can read my own handwriting over here, like pages 12 and 13 of that book, where it talks about this. It talks about this cosmic crash. Remember when the comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, they had those. I think it was 21 fragments over the course of 6 days hit Jupiter. And it began shortly after sunset, shortly after the close of the Sabbath, and then it went right through for 6 days, and the fragments ceased hitting Jupiter just prior to the beginning of the Sabbath. Okay, so that was that 6 days. That was that war in heaven that was spoken of. And then in the book Unveiling Satan, Pastor pointed out again there around April of 1997, and this had to do with the comet Hale-Bopp when it made its closest approach to the earth. That was at the time Satan and her followers were cast to the earth. They were cast to the earth in the midst. So kind of go back over those particular publications: the Nuclear Baby, The Explosion of Sin, and Unveiling Satan. Both of those. And there's undoubtedly we can also go through the book, the program Yisrayl Says as well. We can go through the book Yisrayl Says to point those things out to us as well. So, but this fact is made very plain here, and at that time it was the fact that Satan had not been cast to the earth was made plain in the book of Eob or Yeshub 1:7 and 2:2, when Satan was allowed to roam on the earth and she was actually ascended, went back to and fro making accusations. Okay. Now, Pastor shows here, he says, the accusations of Satan will continue until Yahweh makes the enemies of Yahshua his footstool. So the accusations are still coming. Satan works through her ministers, through her workers. Just as Yahweh works through men, Yahweh is working through a man, through Yahshua Messiah, and through the last day's witness at this time, to bring this message, the message of the kingdom, the message of this final warning to all of to the entire world at this time before the end comes. Just as Yahweh is working through that one man at this time, Satan has many ministers who appear as angels of light, who appears as ministers of righteousness. They transform themselves into that. They're disguised that way because of the way that they dress, because of the face that they put on. They put on some major poker faces. They can walk around all pious with their hands all folded and however pastor does it, looking up at the sky, how all this stuff is going to take place. Look how great we are. All we have to do is believe. We don't have to do anything. Do what you want, and it's, just come to church on Sunday. And that's basically what they're telling the people to do. The Pope made that statement. He made the statement about not wanting, he said, should we reduce salvation to a bunch of legalism, to a bunch of legalistic things? Well, yeah, that's what it is. I mean, there are certain conditions that have to be followed. You know, the laws of Yahweh govern the kingdom. They govern the kingdom of Yahweh, and it's the only answer to the world's problems. You know, they've turned away. You know, they've turned away from those things, and the reason that the world is in the shape it is because of what's been done, and the rejection and the pushing aside and the iniquity that's been practiced. You know, we see the result of that. We're witnesses to that, man. We are witness to what iniquity brings. But you know what? We're also witness to what the laws of Yahweh bring, because we're putting those to work in our lives every single day. And we see the benefit that comes, you know, when you get this many people together, you know, from all walks of life, you get this many people together from different countries, from different cultures, and you put them in close proximity like we are now, like we are during the feast. How many problems do we have? Almost zero. It's almost zero. There's definitely nothing major that ever goes on, because we have that common goal. We have that common thread of striving to become perfect, striving to make Yahweh's character our character. And we see that in a small scale. You know, we see that. And if you remember the big brown peaceful solution books, the big thick commentaries, and we showed in there the blessings that come, how it starts out with a blessing from the individual. Well, we see that blessing that comes from following these laws with the individual, within ourselves. And we can see how applying these laws within our family, how it benefits our family, and how the family members get along. And then among our immediate, then among the community, then among the community that we have here. Among all of us, feast times, and we can see how these things are going to expand and how they're going to grow, and just how it's going to continue and continue right on out into the universe. It's going to take place, man. It is a prophecy. Yahweh's prophecies are sure. There is not one prophecy that he has made that has come to pass. There's not a single prophecy that's failed. Any prophecy that has come to pass that Yahweh has said is going to come to pass has. There are many more yet to come, and they will come to pass also. Just as Yahweh's promises are going to come to pass as well. The fulfilled prophecy proves those very things. And Pastor, that's why he goes through all of these things with us. He goes through and he brings up the prophecies. We're going to get to one here in just a few minutes, just about what we're talking about. But he says the first house of Yahweh, Pastor shows here, fled into the wilderness in the year 70 AY. And this is a historical fact. Remember, Yahshua prophesied that Jerusalem was going to be surrounded, and we're going to see that here in just a few minutes. It was prophesied that Jerusalem was going to be surrounded by the armies. But for some reason, the armies were going to pull back. And Yahshua told the people, he said, when you see this take place, when you see these armies surround, then you need to get away. You need to get out, because that's your opportunity. In Matthew 24, 1-2, it says, Yahshua went out and was leaving the house of Yahweh with his disciples, came to show him the buildings of the house of Yahweh. But Yahshua said to them, do you see all of these things? I say to you, there will not be one stone left sitting upon another, which will not be thrown down. And Yahweh has inspired that the Apostle Luke would tell us much more about the destruction of the temple and the fleeing of the first house of Yahweh into the wilderness. In Luke 21, 5-6, he said, and then as some spoke at the house of Yahweh, how it had been adorned with beautiful stones and offerings, he said, as for these things, not which stone which you are looking at, the days will come which not one stone will be left upon another, each one will be thrown down. After Yahshua made that statement about the temple, the disciples wanted to know when this would take place. And at that point, many people, through their own interpretations, confused the prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple with the prophecy of the end of the age. Now, Pastor showed there, he says, through their own interpretation. So I'm going to try this here and see if we can get this to, yeah, that'll work. Okay. And it shows there in 2 Kepha 1:20, for we have not followed cunningly devised fables. The world wants you to think. The world will try to reduce the teachings that are in your scriptures as nothing more than fairy tales, as nothing more than some fanatical made-up stories that try to teach some type of lesson. But they say, oh, there's nothing really behind them. It's just some philosopher, that is making these things up. There was a class that was offered when I was going through college out in California, and the title of the class was called "The Bible as Literature," and that's what it was taught: the Bible as literature. And in the class description, it was not taking the scriptures as it wasn't taking the scriptures as it would be as a factual work of what it is, but as some work of fiction, some work of somebody's imagination. And they was comparing it to things like Aesop's fables. They were comparing it to different fairy tales, and they would try to draw parallels between the scriptures and these fairy tales. And what they were doing, they were marginalizing the scriptures. They were reducing what the scriptures really were and what they have the power to do to nothing. And that's what they were. That's what they were doing. And remember what Psalm shows, that the laws of Yahweh. Remember, the laws of Yahweh are perfect, right? And they have the ability to do what? Praise Yahweh. The laws of Yahweh are perfect, and they have the ability to convert the whole person if that person will simply apply them in their lives. And then they will actually convert to that character, that perfect, righteous character that Yahweh says that we have to have in order to enter into the kingdom. But we have not followed cunningly deceived fables when we made known to you the power of the coming of our King, Yahshua Messiah. Talking about the prophecies. But were eyewitnesses to his majesty. Yes, they actually saw the fulfillment of that prophecy. And there's many of us here, we have seen the prophecies concerning the two witnesses and the establishment of this house in these last days. Just as they were witness there to the coming, the witness to the power of Yahshua Messiah at that time, we're witness to the authority and what the last day's witness is accomplishing and what he is doing and what this work is doing. And we're a part of that, just as they were. And then he shows down here a little bit further in verse 20, it says, knowing this first, that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. We just can't, these are not Nostradamus' predictions that can be twisted and turned to whatever you want. That no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation, for the prophecy did not come in former times by the will of man. No, it wasn't something that was made up by man just because it hit him and that's what he wanted to write. But it came about by holy men of Yahweh spoke as they were moved by Spirit holy. As Yahweh moved them, they wrote these prophecies. Yahweh inspired these prophecies to be written. And how do we know they're true? Well, you just have to look at the history. All we have to do is look at history. Look at the history here of the destruction of the temple in 70 AY. It took place just exactly as the prophet said that it would. The historians followed the event, followed the event about that, and we're going to see that here in just. I'm getting ahead of myself, but we're going to see we're going to see those historical accounts of there, and then how that prophecy was fulfilled to the very letter. But many people, through their own interpretations, confuse the prophecy of the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem with the prophecies of the end of the age. It is only through the guidance of Yahweh's Spirit Holy that Yahweh plainly shows his prophecies to his house. Remember, it's not for everyone. Remember what Daniel said? Daniel said, none of the wicked will understand. Okay? And who are the wicked? The wicked are those who reject and push aside the law of Yahweh. Okay, so those who do that, they separate themselves from Yahweh. So the wicked have no understanding. They have no connection with Yahweh whatsoever. But the wise, those who reverence Yahweh, those who strive to be like Him, those who keep His laws, those are the ones that Yahweh is working with. In Luke 21, 8 through 11, Yeshua speaks of many world events that are yet to be fulfilled. As Matithia barely commented upon the destruction of the temple and fully dwelt upon the end of the age and the sign of Yeshua's coming, Luke barely comments on the same subject and fully dwells on the subject of the temple and the fleeing into the wilderness. Remember, the scripture says they'll be written here a little and there a little, and it's written that way for a purpose. Yahweh did that for a purpose, to hide these things in plain sight from those whom He did not want that information revealed. But these prophecies that are yet to be fulfilled are the prophecies of the end and Yeshua's coming. Yeshua speaks of a prophecy that would be fulfilled first in Luke 21:12. But before all these, they will arrest you and persecute you, handing you over to the synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before the kings and rulers for my name's sake. Why was Pastor arrested? He was arrested because he stood for Yahweh's laws. He was practicing righteousness. He continues to practice righteousness. But before all these events and the end of the age, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, earthquakes, and diseases, there would be prophecies for the era in the time of the first house of Yahweh. Luke shows the destruction of Jerusalem in the era of the time of the first house of Yahweh. Luke 21:20-24. Now, when you see that Jerusalem is surrounded with armies, then know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Yada flee into the mountains, and let those who are in the midst of the city go out of it, and let those who are in the country not to enter into it. For these are the days of vengeance, and all things which are written For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Yeshua is warning the people there, when you see these things, if you're in the city, flee. If you're outside the city, don't go in. But woe to those who are with child and to those who nurse babies in those days, for there will be great distress in the land and wrath upon this people. And they will fall by the edge of the sword, and they will be led away as captives into all nations. Then Jerusalem will be trampled down by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So we're seeing very clearly here of what this prophecy is telling us here. He says the prophecy of Jerusalem being trampled under the temple, being destroyed, was fulfilled in the year 70 AY. It says Judea was so completely subjugated that the very land itself was sold by Vespasian. There, Jews were either killed or sold into captivity. But those who listened, notice, those who listened to and then heeded Yeshua's prophecy of the destruction of the temple, they did not perish in this destruction. They listened and they believed. They followed their instruction and they were rewarded. They received the blessings of their obedience. Not a single believer perished. You get that? In that era, not a single believer perished. Though there were many in Jerusalem when Cestius Gallus besieged the city. Had Cestius kept Jerusalem under siege, he would have soon made himself the supreme ruler of it. But for some unaccountable and unexpected reason, Cestius Gallus raised the siege, and the believers then escaped. Why? Why did he pull back? They don't know. But he did. He lifted the siege. And the believers, they saw that. They took hold of that and said, we better get. And those who believed left. And those who didn't, well, we're going to see what we'll see here. We have the history there of what took place. It says, when Yeshua said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded with armies, then know that its desolation is near. They believed what he said, and they also obeyed his warning and saved their lives at that time. Yeshua had commanded his disciples to escape when they saw Jerusalem compassed. But how could his followers escape when the armies were surrounding them. Josephus tells us how Yahweh provided a way of escape. And here it says, in the 12th year of Nero, Cestius Gallus, the president of Syria, came against Jerusalem with a powerful army. He might have assaulted and taken the city and thereby put an end to the war, but without any just reason, and contrary to the expectation of all, he raised the siege and departed. After Cestius Gallus had raised the siege, many of the principal Jewish people forsook the city as men do a sinking ship. Well, inner Roman political turmoil caused Cestius Gallus to raise the siege to let the believers of the first house of Yahweh leave the city. After this political turmoil abated, then Jerusalem was besieged by Titus under the orders from Emperor Vespasian. And Yeshua said in Luke 19:43, For the days will come upon you when your enemies will build siege ramps against you, surrounding you, and close you in on every side. Okay, so that was another prophecy of what was going to take place. Well, Pastor shows, he says, this prophecy was fulfilled. Titus, having made several assaults without success, resolved to surround the city with a wall, which was incredibly completed in just 3 days. Okay? The wall was completed in 3 days. The wall was 39 furlongs in length and was strengthened with 13 forts at proper distances, so that all hope of safety then was cut off. None could make his escape from the city, then nothing could be taken into the city. Now, I had to look up what a furlong was. I didn't know. I mean, some of these measurements, anybody know what a furlong is? Okay, nobody else? Okay, I don't feel so bad. I didn't know either. But a furlong is roughly 660 feet, or 0.12 miles. So this wall that surrounded the city was 4.875 miles long. That was the length of that wall, 4.87 miles. And it was built in 3 days. And after it was built, there was no way of escape from the city. It couldn't be done. So you see that those who heeded that prophecy, they forsook the city. They left and they ran as they were instructed to do, because they believed the prophecies. They believed the one sent at that time. The prophecy of the destruction of the temple was only for that one period. There's quite a time span between this prophecy in Luke 21:20 to 24, and the prophecy in Luke 21:25 through 28. Which brings us to the end of this great tribulation and Yeshua's second coming. These future prophecies say in Luke 21:25 through 28, and there will be signs in the sun, in the moon, and the stars, and on the earth, distress among the nations in their perplexity at the roaring and the surging of the sea. Men's courage failing them because of fear, because of the dread of those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of the heaven will be shaken. And you think about, if you've seen the documentaries concerning the development of the atomic weapons and the testing of these atomic and nuclear weapons, and the destructive capability that they have, I mean, it's no wonder you can see the distress among the nations, and the roaring of the surging of the sea. And that's, remember, the sea. Pastor has told us the sea refers to what? Peoples, nations, multitudes, languages, right? So we see that, so we can see that there is distress among the many nations, among the people. Okay, and we see that in the world today. Men's courage failing them because of fear, because of the dread of those things which are coming. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. So when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, because your redemption draws near. Okay, well, Pastor shows her, he says, your redemption is Yeshua. So when we see these things begin to come to pass, know that Yeshua's coming is near. It's at the very door. We've heard the date. We heard yesterday a lot concerning 1224. We've heard about 1224. We've heard a lot about 1224. And there was something interesting about 1224. Let me see here if this was... Okay, so here's December 2016. Okay, and here's the 24th. Well, it's on a Sabbath. Okay, well, I kind of blew this up a little bit. Probably kind of glad oh, great, man, that came out nice. Well, you can see it here. This number up over here, this 359 and 7. Okay, the interesting thing about 359, well, the 359 is the 359th day of the year, so that's what that day falls on. It's the 359th day of the year with 7 days of the year remaining. That's what that means. Well, in that word 359, that word 359 comes from word number 352 and means like a tree or a grove. A tree, a grove. 352 means properly strength, hence anything strong. Specifically, a chief, a pilaster, or somebody that is a strong support. Remember, Yahweh. Remember, we're told that those who obey Yahweh, that Yahweh says, if you obey my voice, I will make you these upright pillars. He who overcomes, I will make a pillar in my house. It's upright, these upright supports. Anything strong, a pilaster, a strong support, or an oak, like a very strong tree, an oak tree. Where are we situated? What's the name of the road that we're on? Praise Yahweh, oak forest. You see, notice that's 350. That's that word. That's out of that Hebrew word there, 359. Okay, now that word 7. 7 is corresponding to word in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary is corresponding to word number 6, which means to destroy or perish. So what you can kind of see there, remember, pastor's told us there's two works that are running side by side, right? You've got the work of Yahweh and the work of Satan. Well, 359 is the larger number there. That shows the work of Yahweh. That work is going to succeed, and the man's government, the work of Satan, is going to perish. So you can kind of see that, just how that's kind of laid out there. I thought that was kind of interesting. When you combine those numbers, 359, 3597, in the Hebrew that means to clap or strike with a noise, a club or a sledgehammer or a hammer. What kind of a sound does a bomb make when it goes off? Boom. A loud clap, a loud thunder, like a hammer coming down. Okay, now that word in Strong's Greek Dictionary talks about a traveling or a journeying. And that's word 3597, and it comes from 3596, which means, again, it's talking about a mode, a way, a journey. And it comes from a compound of two different words. One of them means by implication a progress or by a mode of or means, which comes from, and then the other part of that word means to travel literally or figuratively, especially to remove, figuratively to die. And it comes from word number 3984. It's this one here. Well, you can't see that one there. It comes from word 3984, which means to the idea of piercing. Remember how Moshe described the nuclear bomb? The heavens shall be his wrath, the earth is iron. That iron is through the idea of piercing. Remember, that was used to describe that. So look what this is describing here. This is describing on that day, on this 1224, it's describing, the government of man failing, dying. Actually, that word 6 it shows it to mean to die, to fail, to escape, not to escape, to fail, to lose, to have no way to flee, and to perish. Which is exactly what's going to take place when these bombs go off. Where are they going to go? Where can they run? There's nowhere for them to run. You have 15 minutes, 20 minutes from the time an announcement might be made. And what do they tell you to do? Oh, go flee to a fallout shelter. Okay, you're in a city of 250,000. Where are 250,000 people going to go? You're not going to get a block down the road before the roads are jammed, and it's going to be, for lack of a better term, it'll be utter chaos is what it will be. It's going to be utterly panic. It's going to be a mess. But we don't have to worry about that, man. We don't have to worry about that because Yahweh's protecting his house. This is the protected place. We're in a place of protection. All we have to do is make sure that we don't separate ourselves from Yahweh. But this redemption, our redemption is drawing near. And as we saw in the fifth seal, it says Satan will be cast to the earth. Satan has been cast to the earth. Okay, that prophecy has been fulfilled. Satan comes against and attempts to kill the work of the two witnesses who witness against the lawlessness in this time period. Anytime people have their sins pointed out to them, and they don't have a humble heart where they're desiring to overcome, they have that anger, they have that resentment that rises up within them. Just like Cain did, and you can see, when Cain was told, what took place? His countenance fell. They could read it all over his face, all over his body language. His shoulders he probably kind of got like that, and the scowl on his face, you could probably see his eyebrows and stuff come together, and just the frown come across his face when he was told, "If you do righteousness, will you not be acceptable?" But the desire, sin is crouching at your door. The desire of sin is with you, and you must overcome it. That's not what he was told. That's not what he wanted to be told. That's exactly what he was told. That's not what he wanted to be told. That's not what he wanted to hear. What he wanted to hear is, "Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Just go ahead and just come as you are. Jesus will save you. Just believe, and that's all you have to do." That's what he wanted to hear. He didn't want to hear the truth. But that enraged him. That being told that enraged him. And that rage is the same rage that comes against Yahweh's house. That's what's always come against the prophets of old. You look at the history of how the prophets of old were treated and how they were persecuted and how they were in the mean and the cruel ways that they were treated. And it wasn't because it wasn't because they were being mean to the people or that they had an unrighteous character. It was because they were exposing the sins of the people. And the people did not want to have their sins exposed. Okay? And this is the same type of rage that is going on in the world. This is the same type of rage that Satan has against this house. And she doesn't care who she takes out as long as she can get this work stopped. Well, the prophecies show she isn't going to get this work stopped. This work is not going to be allowed to be put into the grave again, as it was at the end of the 10th persecution. It's not going to be allowed. It will. This work in this house, and our pastor and overseer is going to usher in the kingdom of Yahweh. That's a prophecy. It's a prophesied, given fact of what's going to take place. And we can take that right to the bank. Because not only does Yahweh fulfill his prophecies, he also fulfills his promises. And that is a promise that's given not only to us, but to this world, that this work is going to succeed. And ultimately, it's for the benefit of the world, although they don't see that it is. They will very soon. They will very, very soon. On the top of page 74, it says, "Notice Satan's attempt to kill the two witnesses that Jacob is given to the curse of death while Yisrael is given to reproaches. In Isaiah 43:28, therefore I will dissolve the Levitical priesthood and will give Jacob to the curse and Yisrael to reproaches." Well, if I remember right, it was in the 4th month of 1991, if I remember correctly, that the witness Jacob was given over to the curse. I remember that sermon that was given that made that statement, that made that announcement. And man, you could have heard a pin drop because we didn't know that was going to take place. But it did in fulfillment of the prophecies. Man, that's just one prophecy, that we've seen come to pass. but giving Yisrael to reproaches? Anybody seen that lately? Praise Yahweh, man. That is another prophecy we have seen come to pass. Right before our eyes. You know, when Isaiah wrote this prophecy, when he wrote that, that was like in 750. Isaiah wrote this from 750 to 715 BY. And this verse speaks of the two brothers in the last days, the two witnesses spoken of in Isaiah 44:5. Isaiah 43:28, to give Jacob to the curse. And that word curse, or the theological word book of the Old Testament, by Harris Archer and Waltke, volume 1, pages 324 to 325, says that the curse means to be put to death because one has impeded Yahweh's work because of his harboring of God worshippers or worshippers of Elohim. This shows that the witness Jacob would actually suffer physical death. And look at Isaiah 43:28 again, and Yisrael to reproaches. Look at what reproaches is. Reproaches is word number 1421 on the Hebrew Dictionary of Strong's, and it means to vilify. To vilify, to make a villain of. You know, to speak evil of. To profane. You know, did anybody, I remember they tried to vilify a pastor. Well, he's worse than Al Capone. To profane, to degrade or debase by report. Who remembers who remembers the different news media coverages that were going out at that time? Were they lifting up Yisrayl Hawkins and saying, "Oh, he's being persecuted. Look what a righteous man he is"? It was quite the opposite. It was quite the opposite. They degraded him. They debased him by report with abusive language. With abusive language. To defame. To traduce. Traduce means to oppose. To expose to contempt or shame by slander. Did we see any of that going on? Well, yeah, we saw all of this going on. Word number 1421 comes from 1422, from 1442, meaning to hack with words, to vilify, to revile. So, and man, we saw that prophecy come to pass. And it still comes to pass from time to time. You know, just watch the news. You know, we watch it anytime something comes up about the house of Yahweh or Yisrayl Hawkins. You can pretty well bet it's not going to be anything positive for right now. One of these days, it's going to come across, he was right. Yisrayl Hawkins was right. And actually, that has somewhat come to pass. Although not quite openly, but it has. We know it. We know it. If you remember, this shows, these things show that the witness Yisrael would be attacked with lying propaganda in an attempt to stop the work of Yahweh. Okay? A lot of people who saw those things, probably looked and saw the house of Yahweh, and they looked at, well, these people are a bunch of weirdos. They're a bunch of crazy people. Satan used these approaches to cause the people to say no to Yahweh's laws. That was the idea. That was the plan. But Yahweh had another plan behind it. Because remember, remember when Yosef was taken, when his brothers threw him in the cistern, and then they sold him into Egypt. They sold him off, and Yosef wound up going into Egypt, and he wound up with a job, actually working for Pharaoh. And during that time he was working for Pharaoh, he prophesied, and it was revealed to him about the 7 years of famine that would be coming. And he stored up, and he prepared Egypt for that time of famine. And remember Joseph's words when his brothers came and they saw him, and they were afraid. They were afraid to go anyways near him because of what they had done. And Yosef told them, remember what Yosef told them? He said, "What you did for me, you intended to do to me as a curse. But Yahweh turned it around to use it as a blessing." Man, this is the exact same thing that Yahweh did with the reproaches that Yisrayl Hawkins went through. because it lifted the house of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh was lifted up. It was lifted up as a light for all to see. Although it was not quite in the way that many people probably suspected that the house of Yahweh would be lifted up, in a great light, saying, "Man, look at what these people are doing. This is awesome. We need to go by that. We need to go and follow what they're teaching." There's not much news in that. You look at how the news is and how the news people operate. What do they like? They like a scandal. Man, they like scandal. They like controversy. They don't want to highlight anybody doing a decent job at something. They want to dig up the dirt, and if they can't dig it up, they're going to make it up. Which is what they did with this lying propaganda. But Yahweh used that for a blessing, because look at the publicity. Look at how widespread the house of Yahweh, the name of Yahweh, the name of Yisrayl Hawkins, the house of Yahweh. Look at how far and wide that spread. And you know what? It didn't cost us a dime. It was done for us. Yahweh did that, and we'd have no idea how many people saw that and said, "These people aren't crazy. They're right." Or it cost people to come to Yahweh.com or to say, "Okay, yeah, I'm going to look into this myself." How many people do you think are going to come because of what Satan intended to cause as harm, but yet is going to turn into a blessing for those who didn't believe it, but yet who were brought here because of that lying propaganda? We have no way of knowing. Right now we don't. Maybe in the kingdom we'll find out just exactly how many people were, benefited from that. But remember, Yahweh's in complete control. Yahweh allowed that. And he knew very well what he was going to do and how he was going to benefit Yahweh's house with that. This was Yahweh's way of lifting up the house of Yahweh and Yisrayl Hawkins. And remember the global warming. I remember a pastor getting in there. Somebody said, "And you mean," I can't remember who it was. I can't remember which reporter it was. "And you mean to tell me that global warming is caused by sexually transmitted diseases?" Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And then the ridicule that came because of that. But what have the scientific reports shown since that time? They've proved Yisrayl Hawkins right. They've proved Yahweh right. And pastor knew it all along. But this is the blessing. This is the blessing. This is the benefit, that comes. We just have to remember that Yahweh's in complete control. For the last, and it shows here, it says Satan is busy. It says Satan is busy persecuting the seed of the remaining witness, known as the house of Yahweh, and as 1 Timothy 3:15 says, the pillar of ground of Yahweh's truth. This one group is in a place of safety, protected by Yahweh to continue the work of Yahweh. And I don't know, men, if we realize just how protected we really are. We take things for granted. When we're surrounded here by Yahweh's people, we're surrounded by people with a like mind, who have no desire to take advantage of one another, whose mind is set on overcoming, and whose minds are set on service. We don't realize, I don't think we take it for granted, because that's what we're around all the time. The world is not that way out there. As a scripture shows, in the last days, it showed that those perilous times would come in 2 Timothy 3:1. And it showed those characteristic of how people would behave, of what their character would be, the same as it showed there in Genesis 49. Truce breakers, not keeping their words, false accusers. Well, we see that in the news. Without self-control. Everybody here is in the process. We are striving to practice self-control. The exact opposite of what this world is. They're without natural affection. They're betrayers. They're headstrong. They're always right. Even when they're wrong, they're going to be right. That's not our mindset here in Yahweh's house. our mindset here in Yahweh's house is, if I'm wrong, if I'm doing something incorrect, please show me so I can correct it. That's our mindset. That's exactly what our mindset should be. Lovers of pleasure more than lovers of Yahweh. And that's, the whole world is geared toward pleasure. It's toward entertainment. It's toward the pleasure of pleasing the carnal mind. And that's that whole mindset. But we are protected from that, and it's such a tremendous blessing to have that protection. We just have to be careful, men, that we don't let that out of our sight, that we don't forget it. At this same time, Yahweh opens the door for the witness Yisrael to be traveling by flight for the purpose of teaching Yahweh's laws. And in Revelation 12:13-14, it shows, "And when the dragon saw that she was cast to the earth, she persecuted the woman which brought forth the man. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she nourishes for times and a half a time from the face of the serpent." And Pastor shows here, through the very definition of these words here, that word fly does mean, and that's exactly what it means. The word translated fly is number 4072 from the Greek, and that means it does mean to fly. The word eagle in Revelation 12:14 has the connotation of blowing from an inanimate breeze. An inanimate breeze means something that is not living. That's what inanimate means. It means not living. And you can see there the word eagle from its wind-like flight. Eagle, it was 105 from 109, or the same as 109, and it means to respire, by analogy to blow air. And then it says compare 5594, and then you can see there which properly refers to an inanimate breeze. And this is the same force of propulsion that an engine makes on a jet airplane. And it shows here, it says jet propulsion used chiefly for powering aircraft, a mixture of fuel. Okay, so it kind of goes through the mechanics there of a jet engine. And I kind of have I don't know if you can really see it too well there. And I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination. But all I can basically tell you is here that the air, there's probably people out there that can explain this way better than I can. But the air comes in through the fan blades here, and it goes through. Some of the air goes around the outside. Some of the air is pushed through where it's compressed. Fuel is added, and then it's burned in the combustion chamber, and then it's forced out the back. And that combination causes all of this stuff to turn, which sucks more air in, and so it just keeps right on going. But that whole thing, what it does is it pushes the airplane right through the air. So kind of in a nutshell, that's the best way, guys, that I can try to even attempt to explain that. But that's how that word translated eagle, that's how that comes about. That's what it means. But in Revelation 12:14, or it says, Satan continues to persecute the house of Yahweh when she sees that the house of Yahweh is protected. It kind of infuriates her. That this house is protected, she can't get to it. She can't get to us because Yahweh's only going to allow her to go as far as he'll allow her to go. No, you can't touch my house. No, I'm not going to let you. They're protected. You might be able to, you can give them a hard time over here with this or a hard time over here with that, but no, you can't touch them. They're mine. And she continues to persecute, Satan continues to persecute the house when she sees that it's protected. In Revelation 12:15, and the serpent cast out of her mouth as water as a flood after the woman, that she might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But this woman, the house of Yahweh, has Yahweh's protection. Notice how Yahweh will help his house. In Revelation 12:16, it says, and the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of her mouth. Opened her mouth? Well, men, it's 7:56, so I think page 76 is a great place to stop. So we will go ahead and we will stop here tonight. Next week, the Great Kahan will start here on page 76 at this heading here, opened up her mouth. So with that, may Yahweh be with you and bless you.